Fantastic. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Paul and Karen, who is going to facilitate the Q&A. We'll go through any additional questions that we have. This is really your opportunity to ask any questions. No question is, is out of bounds. Feel free to ask anything. Please use the Q&A to do so, and I'll turn it over to Karen and Paul, who will facilitate the questions.
Great, thank you, Dawn. So we do have a few questions in the Q&A, so let's get things started here. One question is the admissions process of Skaggs Oxford program after the admission to Scripps, or are they happening at the same time separately? I would like to ask Shannon, do you mind answering that question?
Sure, and Dawn, please chime in if I miss anything. But yes, so the Skaggs Oxford program, I'll clarify, we have one application only. So if you're applying to the Skaggs Oxford program, it's the same application as the regular grad program. You'll just indicate on the application if you're interested in Skaggs Oxford. The interview process happens at the same time. The admissions timeline is generally the same. There is a little bit of a separate process that happens with the Oxford faculty. Usually those interviews are set up virtually. And that typically happens, Dawn, does that happen before the interview weekend? I'm trying to recall.
Their deadline for when you'll have to submit their documentation is January. So it happens between January and March when we're having our interview weekend. So it's generally happening simultaneously, but there are two different processes which you have to manage.
Perfect. And while you're on campus, if you're invited for the interview weekend, you will interview with faculty at Scripps as well as one designated Skaggs Oxford faculty while you're here as well.
And I know the other question that you get a lot, Shannon, that we may want to bring up here is that if you're not accepted to Skaggs Oxford, would you still be considered for the Scripps graduate program?
Yes, we get that question a lot. And the answer is yes. If you are not accepted to Skaggs Oxford, your application is still in consideration for the Scripps doctoral program.
Great, thank you.
Great.
While we have some students still here, I would like to ask them a couple of questions. Luke is asking, what is the classroom environment like? How many students are in the courses? Maybe Ian, I'll throw that to you.
So I took all mine when they're mostly virtual. There was the beginning of the being hybrid and coming back in person. So that kind of describes a bit the environment. I think the size it varied, but I think for the bigger ones, we had about 20. And for the smaller, it was 10, 12. So yeah, it was pretty small classes. The way they're run for the ones I took were all pretty similar, where there was generally a paper that was read or a presentation that the students would give on that paper and lead the class through a discussion of it, or there would be sometimes lectures too. So it'd be kind of between the two of those things, either a lecture from a different professor each week talking about some topic and a paper that's reviewed together, or one or the other.
Maybe I can ask Madison or Morgan to talk about their experience this term, now that the classes are all in-person / hybrid. So we still utilize Zoom technology, but the classes are held in person. So would one of you mind talking about your experience this term?
Yeah, so the classes are in person for us. We actually have a Zoom for Florida students to join us, but otherwise most of us are in person. At least for the chemistry department, our classes are very small. There's only like 10 of us, 5 to 10 of us in class. But that is a really good opportunity for you to have that one-on-one experience with the professor. It's not like, a class of 500 students trying to fight to see the board. So I actually think that's really, really nice to have that one-on-one experience with the professor. For us, the chemistry classes tend to be a series of lectures where they ask you kind of mechanistic questions or questions about different compounds while they go through the lecture. Right now I'm in a modern organic synthesis class, so we typically do like a synthesis outline, which is a report detailing a total synthesis. And then we have, of course, exams and some coursework. But all courses are kind of structured a little bit differently, where some have just exams making up the whole grade and others have more coursework. It really depends on the class, but typically they're very small classes in a very intimate setting with the professor, which is pretty nice.
Wonderful. Another question I'd like to ask the students from the audience here, maybe I'll start with Ian again, since he's been here for more than a year. How do you handle work-life balance? Do you participate in any extracurricular activities? And if so, how do you incorporate that into your research schedule?
I feel like for the labs that I've been in, the work-life balance, the labs and classes has been prioritized. Like, I think there's a very easy way to be doing a bunch of work, but also take the time when you need it, and no one's going to be on you for doing that. For me in particular, I was doing a few different student-run clubs, either helping with organizing or being just involved in them. And so, yeah, through that, and then the classwork, lab work, and then some time outside, I felt like I was able to keep a pretty healthy work-life balance through last year.
Great. Anything, Morgan or Madison, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that the rotations are another perfect time to kind of take a litmus test for the work-life balance in the lab. Obviously, it's more difficult to compare your experience to someone who's like a postdoc, but if there are other grad students in the lab, you can kind of see how they divvy up their time and like what time they're arriving in lab, what time they're leaving. But you kind of get to make your own schedule. So that's, if you're someone who's a morning worker, come in the morning and you can be gone by, afternoon, or you could start late if you're not quite a morning person. So I think that's really important to know that about yourself, and then also observe what's going on in the labs that you're rotating in.
Great. Another student-oriented question that I'd like to throw out there from the audience: what have been the most surprising aspects of graduate school? What was different from what you expected when applying, considering graduate school, if anything? Who would like to take that?
I guess what's very surprising for me, and I think I expected this to a degree, but that this is very much student run. So you're going to get out of the program what you put into the program. There's not going to be anyone who's going to come up to you and say, let me teach you this technique. Let me teach you how to set up this experiment, or, teach me this project. It's up to you to approach people and say, can you teach me this? Can you help me with this? And it's up to you to search for things, to look through the literature, and to keep up on what your lab is doing. There's not, it might depend lab to lab, but there's really not a lot of handholding in graduate school, where it has to be a lot of your passion that's driving you forward.
One thing I'd add too is I think one thing I wasn't expecting as much is how much collaboration there really is across different labs, across campus. So it's really easy just to really walk into another lab and just say, hey, could you teach me what you're doing? Or maybe not so bluntly, but ask, do you have any time to talk about something or other? It was surprising to me that it's so, you can just go there and do it. Seems like before I was more used to a style where you have to send an email and then maybe really expect that you won't get any response, and maybe only send it to the technicians in the lab. Here, I feel like the grad students, the PIs, the postdocs, they're all very receptive to that most of the time. Everyone's busy, and so you respect that still, but everyone's also very willing to help.
I would say I was surprised, but also like pleasantly surprised about just all of the mentorship that is actually available. So I guess I considered just maybe the advisor as someone I could be mentored by, but postdocs in the lab are always willing to talk about projects or papers that you've read on the topic. They're very knowledgeable in just the inner workings of the lab and different projects that are going on. So you can find many mentors along the way. And I feel like that's really helped me solidify like my interests and also better understand what is actually going on in the lab, because often there's a lot of different things going on that is outside of the scope of your rotation.
Great, thank you for those responses. Question that I will throw out to Paolo. If my previous research experience is in the organic chemistry department, yet I'm curious in research in the biochemistry department, would it still be beneficial to talk about my previous research in organic chemistry in my personal statement?
Yes, so we had a faculty committee talking about that, but yes, you could talk about your prior research experience in the research statement. As in the application itself, you have several areas where you can sort of state, what research you want to be going into. That's available at Scripps if you want to switch over to biochemistry. One would be in the research statement. In the application, you also select different research areas that you'd be interested in participating in as an applicant, as well as selecting up to 6 faculty members. So those are different ways where you can express that you're interested in perhaps pivoting into biochemistry, but still address your prior research in organic chemistry in the research statement.
Great. Another question is, how does the graduate school encourage diversity and inclusion among students of various backgrounds? I think that's an important topic and something that Scripps Research is certainly committed to. And I think we also understand the value and benefits of having a diverse student body, but also a diverse faculty body and administrative body as well. So there are several events and workshops going on throughout the year, as well as some web pages on our intranet, where students can also bring up ideas or feedback in terms of how we can do better to encourage more diversity and inclusion at the Institute. So it's definitely something that is always on our mind. And I was gonna also throw it to Dawn to see if she had any other comments about this as well.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Always happy to talk about DEI. There's a number of things that the Institute has been doing, particularly in response to the issues a couple of years ago. The Institute decided to recommit itself to DEI and have a DEI advisory committee to really evaluate what it's doing internally and externally to support DEI. We started by having a really in-depth analysis and asking people at the Institute about their experiences so that we can really try to address what's happening to the folks who are on the campus. Now that internal analysis has been done, and it was actually done by an external evaluator because we wanted to make sure that everyone felt comfortable to share their experiences, we're now putting together a strategic plan to be able to address the issues that were raised by our consultants and the community, the Scripps community. So we're taking DEI very seriously and plan to do everything that we can to support DEI. In the meantime, we've got a number of different activities that we're doing both within the graduate school as well as at the Institute. Within the graduate school, we have a DEI seminar series that we've been hosting where we're bringing in different speakers to talk about DEI and how it impacts research, how it impacts our students, and how it can impact mentoring. We have and you've probably heard today from just the 4 students that were on the panel, that their backgrounds are very different. We had students who were coming from community colleges. We have students who are coming from primarily undergraduate institutions. We have graduate students who are coming from big research institutions. Some of them took time off, some didn't. All of these different experiences really make for a fantastic student body who are engaged in learning and talking to each other and learning from their own experiences. So we really try to bring in diverse students into our graduate program and then try very hard to provide them with a diverse set of research experiences and opportunities at the Institute.
Any other questions? Looks like we've gone through all the questions in the Q&A, but we still have a little bit more time if anyone has any other questions remaining.
Paul, while people are writing their questions in the Q&A, I'm wondering if maybe we can get the students to just talk a little bit more about the clubs. I know I started working with Ian on the our seminar series that the graduate students run. Maybe we could just talk a little bit about that, Ian, if you don't mind, because it's really important that the students' voices are heard throughout the Institute, particularly when we're talking about bringing in speakers who they want to hear from the perspective of their research, but also possibly from the perspective of career opportunities. So maybe Ian can talk about that. And then if any of our other graduate students are involved in other clubs and organizations within the institution, they can mention them as well.
Yeah, so the group that Don's talking about is the Graduate Student Council. So I'm helping with one of the speakers we're trying to bring in. So like she was saying, it's part of this series where we have the students choose who they want to invite as speakers. In my case, the person who I was interested in inviting is this Celine Haliua, who is the founder of this company called Loyal, which I'm interested in aging research. She does aging research with this company, in particular, trying to have ways for dogs to live longer. And everyone has their beloved dogs and has a vested interest in this. And so they actually tap into that for doing almost clinical trial, preclinical trial data from these dogs. And so she's just an interesting case. She's a female founder, is very a loud advocate for female founders, which are a minority in the entrepreneurial space, and also had an interesting route to her position. She actually, I don't believe, did a PhD. She went straight from her undergrad, but then had some research experiences. She learned a lot of things along the way, was in different startups and venture capital, and then eventually found herself as the founder of this company. So that's one thing. That's one person that I found really interesting, and then asked other students, and they also found interesting. So we were able to invite them, with the crust of the grad school being the thing that's bringing her in. And that's really awesome. Looking forward to that a lot next month or two when she'll be able to speak for us. But besides that, the Graduate Student Council, I also was helping found this biotech club for Scripps, because a lot of people are also interested in that space, as kind of just alluded to for my own interests. And then also there's this kind of on the DEI side, besides what the Institute's doing, there's also lots of graduate students and postdocs and PIs here that are interested in providing mentorship to bring in people from diverse backgrounds. And so we do that. I help through organizing this group that is helping people from underrepresented groups get into CERT programs and REUs by providing mentorship. And so there's just a lot of these student clubs on campus that are student run, that are trying to have a positive impact in different ways.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I heard you mention, but we also have the Network for Women in Science on campus, which does some activities as well. And I saw in the Q&A, sorry, it's completely off topic, but somebody asked about computational chemistry in the Q&A. And I invite them to look up Professor Donna Blackman's at Scripps, because that's the main computational chemistry lab we have.
I thought that Dr. Engel was also doing some computational chemistry. Is that not the case anymore, Madison?
We do that as a collaboration project, so there's also opportunities for that in our lab as well. And we focus a lot on drug discovery and applications in pharmaceuticals. So if that's something that's an interest of yours, that's also where the Engel lab is at. So keep that in mind as well.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but whenever I hear computational chemistry, I think of him. So thank you, Madison and Ian, for sharing your comments about the clubs. I also wanted to take this opportunity, since we only have don't have many questions in the Q&A, so there's also a very robust set of programs to outreach to different communities. We have internship opportunities for undergraduates and high school students, and many of our graduate students and postdocs serve as mentors to these interns who come to our institute during the summer. And for that, we have a training program available to our graduate students and postdocs, so they learn how to be a good mentor. They start to ask questions about, how, if people are understanding information, how to set up goals, how to deal with cultural competencies, etc. So there's really a great opportunity for our graduate students to also learn how to support DEI at the Institute and in their future. All right, if there are no other questions, maybe this is a good time to wrap up. First, let me thank all of you for your attention and for your great questions and for your time. We really appreciate getting to hear about your interests and what types of questions are on your minds. Let me also thank our faculty, Dr. Luke Wiseman and Dr. Laura Salt, for joining the webinar and talking to you about the admissions issues and questions and how to prepare the strongest application. Let me thank our graduate students, Madison, Morgan, Ian, and also Allison, for their time and for really giving you a deep understanding of what it's like to be a graduate student here at Scripps Research. And then lastly, I want to thank all of my team members who have worked so hard to put this together and have facilitated all of the various sessions. So thank you, Karen, Paul, Shannon, and Paulo, and Jeremy, for all of your support and work in making this a really great event. So if you have any other questions, you should always feel free to reach out to us at our email address, admissions@scripps.edu. You can also find more information about all of our programs at education.scripps.edu. So feel free to reach out to us, and we do hope to see an application from you in the very near future.